Okay, supposedly we are live and a few seconds into the broadcast. If you could see it, Daniel, let me know, but everything should be up and running.
I'm getting a
Uh,
blank page right now.
Getting a blank page, let me check the Facebook page then. Yeah, it says we're live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter
There
right
you
now.
go. We're live. We just
Okay,
popped in.
there's probably some latency.
Yeah.
But I don't know how significant the second delay is or what it's set to currently, but we're good then because I see it on Facebook too.
Yeah, it's a few
Hello,
seconds.
everybody, and welcome back to the twice a month Freedom Model question and answer session. My name is Matthew Sparks. This is my friend and coworker, Daniel Pelorge. We are Freedom Model coaches here at the Freedom Model for Addictions. We get together on the first and third Wednesday of every month at 4 o'clock Eastern Time, 3 o'clock Central, and take questions from the community that have normally been given to us ahead of time, and take some time to sort of go over them and answer as many of them as we can get into this hour that we have here. Those of you that are currently watching, if there are questions that you really want answered, you can post them in the chat. And if it's something that we can answer in a reasonable amount of time, I will do my absolute best to answer those questions. Other than that, Daniel, you want to plug the usual stuff?
Yeah. For whoever's watching, please watch this stuff on YouTube. It really helps the algorithm for us to get exposure uh, onto people who don't know about us. So that's kind of like a big deal. And obviously, subscribe, like, and comment. And of course, if you don't like what we're doing, press the dislike button.
Feel
We
free to
love all
tell us.
Yeah, we love all types of engagement. If you want to contest what we're saying, write some comments. At some point, we might actually even do a series about our haters. So, if you want some fame, that's the place to go. Um, but
I would be
yeah,
happy to have a conversation with you, or if you have any
you,
questions, or would like a discussion of some sort, or you have questions about some of our citations or claims or something like that. Our email addresses are beneath our faces as well, so you can contact us there. Obviously, a long written format might be more appropriate for some types of answers. And then, of course, we could always have a sit down conversation like regular folks.
yeah,
As usual, check us out at thefreedommodel.org. The vast majority of the information you could ever want about the program can be found on that website, whether it be about coaching, the online program, about us, the history of the program, the co-founders, co-authors, Mark and Michelle, and anything of that nature. Check out the website, please. Other than that, Daniel, are you ready to get into this?
yeah, let's do it.
All right. So, um, the first question we're gonna jump into, I believe, was one that you got recently. You said, right?
Yeah, I went into the discussion forum and asked what people wanted us to talk about, and we got a few
Okay.
questions. So this is the first one.
Excellent. Love to hear it. So this is a two-parter. Um, the first question being, I guess, sort of asking for a discussion around the habitual and ritualistic aspects around addiction and the triggers associated with that. There are a number of what you're going to find with a lot of addiction terminology is that certain words come with a lot of baggage, and that there's already a lot of embedded meaning in some of them, which is a lot of our job is doing away with a lot of this embedded meaning that's just not true. But we have to point it out first to people and then explain it. And some of that's going on right here with this, just that sentence alone. So if Daniel, you kind of want to jump into this to get us going.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to unpack here. Because of course we're talking about rituals, we're talking about habits, we're talking about addiction, we're talking about triggers. So, there's just a lot of stuff in there. And so first off, when we're talking about rituals, there's a lot of rituals surrounding substance use. And depending on what culture you're part of, right? And I'm not talking like specific countries or so on and so forth. There's junkie culture, there's crackhead culture, and so on and so forth. There's these different rituals that are associated with this stuff. And I forget where I got this, but it was a pretty interesting study on heroin users, and it was in New York City, if I remember correctly, where the quality of the heroin was so low that you couldn't even really get loaded off of it at that point, and yet people were still shooting up heroin, and that's like even if there was no pretty much like no active ingredient in it. I've also seen this in discussion forums. I will look it up. I believe I screenshotted this because it was so shocking in a sense, where the person was
like,
basically,
if your tolerance is too high, it's just completely ineffective.
yeah, well, this person was like, you know what, I don't want to do heroin anymore, but like I love injecting, and they were still injecting intravenously, except they were just shooting up water.
I've heard
And
this multiple times in person from people that I've known.
yeah, and so that's something that's really interesting to notice. Also, when we're talking here in Montreal at the McGill University, there was a study a couple of years ago that was done on placebo and psychedelics. And it turned out that over 60% of people that were taking the placebo were actually getting a psychedelic experience from the placebo, right? So that tells us a lot about the ritual, about the beliefs, the entire context of the ingestion of the substance. So that's something that's important to understand. Then, he's talking about a ritual / habits, right? Well, when you break a habit, it can feel very, very weird at first, because we have this, habituated pattern of doing things, right? We have this specific ritual that we do. And so changing that can feel really, really weird. And that kind of ties in with a couple of other questions that we have today. I think, the main topic of today's Q&A is really learn connections. So there's that. And then, of course, I'm not going to jump into the whole idea of addiction. But for those who have been following us for a while, you kind of know where we could go with that. But he jumps in on using the word trigger, right? And of course, a trigger is a basic, like action reaction, right? It's cause and effect. And that's not something that happens with humans outside of like the example in the book where, you get hit by a car, you go flying, yeah, that's a cause and effect.
Or like the knee tap in the doctor's office.
Yeah, the way you react to being hit by the car, that's gonna vary depending on your reasons. Now, in hypnosis, there's this concept called an anchor, right? And this is specific to neurolinguistic programming. And it's basically a form of operant conditioning, right? So if, let's say, you made out with a girl and there's a specific song that's playing, and then you end up marrying that girl, right? Well, then you're going to have what we call our song, right? When that song comes up, those memories are going to be brought up, and you're going to be like, feel all special about that one specific song. So that's something to understand when we're talking about triggers, right? That there is no cause and effect relationship, but, certain things will engage in someone's mind, other ideas. They will connect. And that's something that we discuss a lot in the chapter of Learn Connections, right? And there is that basic understanding even in 12-step, right? That like one of the things they tell us is to avoid people, places, and things. But the problem, of course, with avoiding people, places, and things is that people, places, and things are, the meat surrounding life itself, right? And if you're trying to avoid all this stuff, you're basically living in fear, which is a horrible idea. Now, I also had a hypnosis teacher who I thought was hilarious when he said this. He was like, if you've been depressed in the same sofa for years and years and years, and then you go see the hypnotist and he helps you with your depression, and then you go right back home and you sit down in the same sofa that you've been depressed in for years and years and years, the odds are pretty good that you're going to start feeling depressed again. So burn your sofa. Now, I'm not advocating that. I think, but it is something that's kind of.
So I was not expecting you to say torture sofa.
Yeah, sorry to make you laugh. But yeah, that's not something that I'm advocating for, obviously. What we're looking at is rather the idea that you have to reinterpret the experience, right? But again, coming back to this idea of habit, it is normal if you're thinking about a certain thing sitting in the sofa all the time, that, once you come back and sit on the sofa, you might have those ideas, but that's not going to force you to do anything at any time. I remember you were talking about, you were at the gym, I believe it was, and you choked out a lung basically, and you decided that was that for smoking, and you didn't smoke again.
I
Um,
quit that second, and smoking was over. That was in March of 2018. I was on rep
exactly.
9 doing a dumbbell row with a 55-pound dumbbell. Like that's how vivid it is to me.
Exactly. My friend Mike has a really, really similar experience where he basically smoked, and I've talked about this a few times. He smoked a lot of weed, and one day he had a panic attack when he smoked some weed. And he pretty much decided then and there that he did not want to feel that ever again. And so he has never smoked weed ever again. So, it doesn't have to be an extreme reinterpretation in one go, just like that, but the idea is that you have to like sit down and really look at like, well, what am I getting out of this? And am I really getting that out of that? Um, and once that happens, the value changes. So you might still, for a certain amount of time, have a habitual thought pattern that just pops up, like walking in front of your dealers. You're like, oh yeah, my dealer lives there, but that's it. Eventually that's just going to fade away. And in no way, shape, or form whatsoever is that a quote unquote trigger, right? That's not forcing you to go into your dealer's house and buy some dope, right? So yeah, it's, obviously I've been going on for about 10 minutes. There's a lot to unpack in there. I could go on for
Oh
probably
yes, I
another
could go
hour,
on.
just on this topic. But, question of time and respect to people who are watching, I think I'm going to cut it at that. Obviously, if you want to have a deeper discussion about this stuff with me, my email is right there. You're welcome to contact me. And I'm findable on Facebook as well.
Yeah,
So I'll
there's a
throw it
reason
back.
we have like a 470-page book, like about this stuff. There's a lot
Exactly.
to unpack. We've been using this sort of like loaded language for decades and decades at this point, and the vast majority of the public is just not really aware of it, which is why sort of creating a more informed public dialogue is like such an important part to making a difference when it comes to like how we deal with people's problematic substance use. Just to not to spend an enormous amount of time on this, but just to sort of give my 2 cents at the first bit of this, because it kind of just seems like a discuss these concepts request almost. Like Daniel initially said, as far as the discussion about how we view addiction, I'm sure a lot of you here are pretty well aware of how we look at that. Um, I'm not going to explicitly spell it out for you, but we don't believe that it's a chronic relapsing brain disease. I can absolutely promise you that. And it's not something that's ever going to make you powerless, hijack your brain, rob you of your willpower, or anything of those, anything like that sort of nature. Moving on from that, um, the habitual ritualistic aspects of, I think Daniel pretty thoroughly covered. The only thing I wanted to add was just that sort of from like a neuroscientific standpoint, things that you do all the time, your brain adapts to making them easier and easier to do, which is part of the process of building associations. Things that register as particularly rewarding or like you have some emotional association to, you might build that association faster. So it makes sense that like if you use a substance over and over again and you believe that it's helping you like deal with your depression, which is not something we subscribe to here at the Freedom Model, but many people do. Um, that's like whenever you think of depression, you're going to associate it with this substance, or whenever you get depressed, what you're going to think about is using this substance. And the more you engage in this activity, the faster that's going to be the first thing that you think about. So like this is a totally normal phenomenon that happens. There's nothing abnormal going on in your brain when this is occurring. There's nothing wrong with you. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with you. There's also nothing going on here that robs you of your agency to do something different. Just because you have an association with two things doesn't mean you can't separate them. That we would be enslaved to so many things if that was the case. We would never accomplish or do anything really. So that's definitely not the case either. So I just wanted to make sure that those things were clear. And then just additionally, the idea of triggers. A trigger is like an association where just again going back to sort of like the loaded language. This idea of a trigger oftentimes comes paired with this deterministic component, and what I mean by that, cause and effect, as if your free will has been removed from the equation. Like, if a certain trigger happens, you were predetermined to reciprocate a specific way, independent of what you actually want to do, or what you think you would choose to do. And then, as you might be able to guess at this point, based on what I've said thus far, we absolutely do not subscribe to that whatsoever, and believe very firmly that not only is that extremely harmful, but it's quite easy to verify that this is not true, and there's a large body of academic evidence that supports that position. So if you're ready with that, if you're done with that half, Daniel, I'll go ahead and read the next one.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so part B here is I understand the concept of cocaine impacting body and brain, thus not being able to solve your problems. But I take it to numb my feelings and just make the day go quicker. Is that true, or is that something my mind thinks is happening? This could be a complicated answer for a number of reasons, but Daniel, I'll let you go ahead and get into this.
Yeah, well, without jumping into like a bunch of neuroscience stuff, really the general idea is, again, learn connections. Like I said, seems to be the topic of a lot of our questions today, right? So basically what you're doing is you're associating certain physical sensations in your body with other things, right? So, for a lot of heavy substance users, if I could probably say all, but I'm not going to go there. When we're using, we're in our own little world, right? So yeah, it is easy to kind of like lose time or have these impressions that we're numbing our feelings and so on and so forth. Just consider the fact that a lot of people smoke, which cigarettes, which is a stimulant, in order to relax, right? So you're taking something that's going to stress your body, but the mind is so powerful that your association with the increased heart rate and everything that comes with a stimulant is to relax, right? And again, another example is people who are drunk driving, right? So you're driving down the road, you had a little bit too much to drink, and a cop pulls you over. All of a sudden, you're acting 100% sober, right? Now your motor functions are still real in bad shape. So, if you've had way, way, way too much to drink to the point where, you can't walk properly, well, you're not going to sober up to that extent, because like I said, it does affect your body. But if you're past the 0.05 or 0.08, depending on where you are, that's the legal limit. And you're not massively intoxicated, you could act pretty goddamn sober for someone who's having a buzz. Now, 2 minutes ago, you were in the car, but you were in your own little world. You might have been acting out, acting crazy, singing your lungs out and just doing some wild stuff. You thought that you had this serious buzz happening. So there's a huge difference between the physical sensation, right? The actual effect on the body and what's going on in our mind. And I think those examples are really, really good to explain how, yeah, exactly that. When we get loaded, we go into our own little world, So yeah, without getting into a bunch of neuroscience stuff, and I know we talked about it real quick, the answer is a bit complex. So yeah, that's as far as I'll go on that one for today.
That is a good example. That's one that I like to use a lot too. Because I know I would assume most people, if you indulge in any sort of like mind-altering substances, have had the experience where you were like feeling a buzz and then something really stressful happened, or like maybe like an in-law called you, or like something came in and just like ruined the buzz for you. It's just the same sort of like with alcohol, for instance. Alcohol works in a bunch of different ways in terms of how it's impacting your brain, but it's certainly slowing your motor function down. Your buzz is now definitely going to be ruined if you're getting pulled over by the cops. You're no longer interpreting this experience as like sort of a pleasurable, pleasurable, like sing along, happy go lucky experience driving after you've had some drinks. Buzz eliminated. Motor function impairment still very much there, which is why if you drink above the limit, like you said, you're a host. It's like game over for you at that point. Like, and that sort of like perfectly illustrates this sort of the line we're trying to draw between sort of your interpretations, expectations, and beliefs, and the actual pharmacological impact that the substance is exerting. Those Your beliefs can certainly impact the pharmacological effects of the substance, which is why there's so much talk about set and setting oftentimes in drug use studies, particularly with psychedelics, which is why the waters can get murky there. But I'm not, again, like he said, we're not going to, this is not about to become like a pharmacology or a neuroscience lecture. Additionally, there's the parts where he says, I take it to numb my feelings and just make the day go by quicker. Well, cocaine historically has been used as a topical anesthetic before. So are you literally making like you can make, you can feel numbness in your face or in your mouth or in your nose, but it's not numbing your feelings. I'm not even really, I wouldn't even actually know, despite having a background in neuroscience, what numbing feelings would look like at like a pharmacological level, because there's just not something you could describe at like a material level. You just can't. So, and also so much of this is up to individual interpretation, as we just talked about how people's expectations and such and beliefs carry into this. As far as like making the day go by, that's where it gets complicated with the neuroscience stuff. Like if you're taking into to account that like maybe your attention span is switching from different places like very very quickly because you're stimulated, or there might actually be some pharmacological impact on like the brain's like the process that it actually experience by which it experiences time. There is research conducted on this. I'm not an expert on that stuff, and I'm not about to like start pulling up academic papers to try to break that down. But you don't even really need to know the answer to that to know that it's not solving your problems. It's not numbing your feelings. And if you're looking for things to make the day go by faster, that's probably because you're dissatisfied with your day for some reason. Like, so if you're working during the day, maybe that means you don't like your job. Like, consider your options when it comes to like the situation of not liking your job. Is cocaine the best one that we could potentially produce to get you out of the situation where you're experiencing dissatisfaction with your day? And I bet if we sat down with you in a one-on-one coaching scenario, we could find some alternatives that you really believed in that you would find, much more motivating and persuasive than having to use cocaine to make the day go by, independent of its effect on your interpretation of the passing time. Because whatever the effect may be, you're not going to blink by 8 hours. It's just not going to happen. There are much better and healthier and more sustainable solutions to the problem if you're dissatisfied with your everyday life. And again, that's something we'd get into in sort of a one-on-one coaching situation, because that would be highly individualistic. So I think that's about as I know I'm long-winded, but that's about as succinct as I'm just going to leave it there. So if you're ready, Daniel, we'll move on to sort of the next question.
Yeah. These were pretty big questions. The questions themselves were really short, but there's a lot to unpack there. So obviously, yeah, some of this stuff is really it comes, like you said, it comes down to one-on-one coaching, because we'd really have to sit down and look at people's motivations, for exactly that. Why are you using,
Right.
to that degree?
And as far as like the science goes, neuroscience is like as far as like the history of science goes, is still a budding field, and there are so many things that we don't know. I would say because we don't know what we don't know, but I would guess that we're like infantile in our understanding and the way that most things work, because a lot of the evidence that we have is like correlational stuff. And the evidence that you may have been given in treatment centers, like with the fMRI brain scans and stuff like that, it's not real evidence. But the average person is never told that. I would never expect someone to know that unless you talk to someone within the field of neuroscience or like or a researcher or something. So that's merely the traditional 12-step disease model based treatment center trying to take advantage of people, by using lingo that they themselves don't understand, banking that other people aren't going to understand it as well. So it's just a manipulation tactic. So what little we do know can get insanely complex very, very quickly. And like, I would bore you guys to death
Mm.
live on air going over some of this stuff. Like, it's just not the best use of our time. And the changes that that the vast majority of people are seeking to make don't require any of those answers whatsoever. So it's
Yeah.
outside of the realm of the stuff that we need here. So moving on to the next question. Really surprised myself this week. Bought the book and listened to the podcasts every night. We appreciate that. You taking the time to read and listen to the podcasts. Hope you like them. Using the skills and thought processes, Coke just isn't doing it for me at all anymore. I guess it's cocaine day. I cut down to about 2 lines a day compared to the usual 2 grams, and have had nothing at all for the last 2 days. I'm not saying I'm fixed. Well, you're not broken. There's something wrong with you, so you wouldn't be moving into a status of fixed. I know that sounds like semantics maybe to some people, but that is absolutely not. It's a very important distinction. I'm not saying I'm fixed, but I'm astounded by how the approach has helped me so quickly. I before I let let Daniel jump into this, I just want to say that I'm very happy that it's helping you so quickly, and that for everyone that is listening, cutting down in quantities can still absolutely be celebrated as a success, which is something that's denied, like entirely, basically in our treatment world, which is very frustrating and very counterproductive. So I just wanted to mention that as well. So Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think the person really, they brought up the key sentence right here, right? When they're like, well, Coke just isn't doing it for me at all anymore, right? That's usually the tipping point where someone's either going to start cutting back massively or they're going to stop completely. And so he talked about, well, I started by cutting down, right? And for the last 2 days, I haven't been doing any at all. So this is really something that's typical, right? Where you kind of start questioning things, and then you're like, you know what? It doesn't seem to be working. But if the learn connection is really strong, it's absolutely normal to go back there and test the waters, right? And eventually, it kind of fades out through time as every single experience pretty much confirms that, yeah, it's really not working anymore. Um, I think a really good example in my personal life is magic mushrooms. So I used to do a lot of magic mushrooms, and then I had a less than enjoyable experience, and I kept on doing it for a while, hoping to get back those fun experiences
Awfully
from the
bold of you.
past. Yeah, and it wasn't working. It just was not working. And eventually, I stopped trying to make it work, right? Like I came to the conclusion that, like, yeah, no, the fun that I had doing the mushrooms, that's in the past. And it's again, it comes back to once you know that Santa Claus isn't real, you can't go back to believing in Santa Claus. Once I came to the conclusion that the mushrooms were not what was driving these experiences, but rather my beliefs about the mushrooms. Well, then it just became like, well, when I take mushrooms, I just feel massively intoxicated, which was really not as fun as having a wild spiritual entheogenic experience. So, yeah, that's what you're going through. It's absolutely normal. And I think one of the big dangers is this is the kind of stuff that's not taught in rehabs and treatment facilities. So people, when they leave those places, right, they're most likely going to try it out once again, right? They're going to dabble in what they were doing before, even though they, you know, had probably decided at some point that they wanted it to be done. And then they're going to fall into one of two categories. And that's like, oh my God, you see, I relapse. I'm an addict. My situation is hopeless, which is really not a good place to be. Or um, I lost my train of thought on that one. But yeah, like basically, it's really, really sad that people are not explained that it's normal that you're going to go, that there's a high likelihood that you're going to try it out again to see, is this really true? And, once you come to the confirmation that it's not true, you're just going to move on. You're just going to be like, why waste my time? But if that experience is taken as evidence that, you're an addict or that you're hopeless, that can drag you to a really, really bad place, right? So yeah, I think it's important to understand this type of experience within context, right? And the context is you're reinterpreting stuff. It has not cemented in completely. And so you're testing the waters, right? And you're coming to that final conclusion that, you know what, my life's probably going to be a lot better without Coke. And that has to be more than just on an intellectual level. That has to be on an emotional level as well. If I don't feel like doing something in my life, the odds are pretty high that I'm not going to do it. If I don't feel like doing something in my life, and on top of that, I know intellectually that it's a really bad idea to do it, the odds are extremely low, like virtually nil, that I'm going to do it because I know it's a stupid idea and I don't feel like it's going to bring anything positive in my life. So I won't do it. But before I get to that ultimate conclusion, I can know that it's not the best of ideas, but I can still feel like, maybe it'll work and test it out. So it's important to understand that in order to not frame that experience as some sort of failure, right? It's quite the opposite. If you've been cutting down like that, that just goes to show that your odds of cutting out completely are pretty goddamn high.
And they're already pretty high.
Exactly. When we're talking about cocaine, we're talking about a remission rate of like 99%.
Yeah, it's like 99.
That's pretty high. And and we're not even taking into account that it's something like 85% of people who do cocaine don't even develop a problem in the first place.
Right.
So you have this small percentage of people that are going to have a problem. And out of that small percentage, almost all of them are going to walk away from the problem. Yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about that wonderful article that we saw this week about cocaine and why people were dying around the cocaine.
Oh, we
But
talking about the Nora Volkow one?
yeah,
My favorite person. Yeah, I'll try to squeeze her in to my bit. Are you ready to pass off?
yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Okay. Um, I didn't have initially a whole lot to add to what Daniel just said. I kind of wanted to emphasize the idea that we sort of an indirect of our incredibly ineffective and incredibly actually no, this isn't even indirect. This is a direct consequence. This is a direct consequence of our insanely backwards way of helping people move beyond their substance use problems is that moving beyond something that you don't think you want to do anymore is a totally natural phenomenon we do all the time with things of all kinds. And there's nothing special about substance use compared to other habits or even other people that you perceive to be as enjoyable or pleasurable in some capacity that makes it special, that it requires a different phenomenon entirely than everything else that's existed in the history of our sentient experience of, as mankind on this planet. Like, we're just stealing from people like the natural aging out phenomenon, as it's often referred to, and like psychology papers, which is basically you just like get tired of doing something, you decide it's not you for you anymore, or you have sufficient motivation to stop doing it, or you don't even have to stop. Maybe you just do less of it. Like, just make change at all. And the way that we have it set up now is that anything that's not going from diagnosable substance use disorder to lifelong abstinence is considered a failure, which is just absolute insanity. And it's just unbelievable. And it's so harmful because if you've been doing something for quite some time, and if a lot of it has been, perceived as enjoyable, like it makes total sense that like maybe you might give it a few more shots. But now if you've pumped this person up full of this idea that they're powerless and they actually don't have, like, once they ingest the substance, they have no control over how they ingest the substance at that point. They're just going to keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And at that level, like, you've screwed them. Like, you're stealing from them like the one thing that they need to make changes as part of this process, which is like their agency or like knowledge of their own agency. Because like these drugs don't ever steal your free will from you, as I've said before. They don't even steal a piece of your free will, not a fraction of a percentile. It's just not something that happens. Um, it was there was something else, but just like you, I had something there, and then like it just goes. So it's loss of train of thought day too. Um, like this person here, if you went into rehab and be like, "Hey guys, I used to be using a lot more cocaine, and then I decided I wanted to cut down, and so far I'm down from 2 grams a day to 2 lines a day." They would just kick you out of the rehab for not being abstinent, and you might end up homeless. And like the consequences could be like sky high.
Yeah.
And your life could just snowball from that point downhill because of the way that we treat people in that situation, which is horrible. Um, at the end there, I just want to one more time emphasize, you say, I'm not saying I'm fixed. You're not broken. You never were broken. We're not doing anything. You're getting to do this. We're just giving you information. We're not bringing you from a broken, faulty, damaged, or anything like that to a fixed state. There's not even anything unusual going on in your brain. You learn to use drugs the same way you learn all other habits, especially ones that you have like a high level of emotional attached to. It's oftentimes why I compare substance use to relationships that become toxic, because you can pursue them despite negative consequences, or even though your family doesn't want you to, or even though it costs you a bunch of money. But nobody sends you to support meetings to like try to teach you how to every single day pray to God that you don't go back to your girlfriend that you're still in a toxic relationship. You see how insane this sounds? Like, that's how insane it actually is. So I just want to make sure that that's like really, really apparent. The article that Daniel was referring to, just real quick, there was an article that was posted, and I can't remember the name of the journal, or even if it was an academic journal off the top of my head. It was Addiction something. But it quoted Nora Volkow a whole lot, who is the head of NIDA, who get to decide something like 95% of all addiction research funding around the globe. And they are the largest proponents of the chronic relapsing brain disease model. So like if you put two and two together there, you gotta figure out like why is everybody really into this brain disease model so much? And why is there so much research on it? That might be part of the answer right there. But because maybe the opioid epidemic storyline isn't grabbing as much attention or research dollars as before for some reason. We've introduced stimulants back into the equation, and she's trying to raise concern about overdose deaths that involve it was cocaine and methamphetamine specifically. But then later towards the end of the article, they bring up the fact that pretty much all the deaths are involved in a combination of drugs, which is code for these were drugs purchased on a black market that were tainted with fentanyl, and the fentanyl killed the person. Why does that happen? Because black markets are dangerous. You don't know what you're getting, and there's a lot of fentanyl and a lot of black market drugs right now. It's going to be very dangerous to buy drugs on the black market. So the entire thing was just like pointless. They're just like fear stirring at that point, or like trying to get more federal money to like look into this further for some reason. I don't even know. The thing was frustratingly pointless. Like I'll never get those paragraphs or that time back. That was the article he was talking about. If there was there anything else you wanted to say, Daniel?
Yeah, no,
Besides
it's a
any
huge
tirade?
it's a huge catch 22, right? Because the whole idea is let's demonize drugs, and the demonizing drugs is going to what reinforces prohibition, and prohibition is what causes the drugs to be cut with all this stuff that's not the best, which again causes the issue. And then because there's an issue, let's demonize drugs. It's basically going around in circles on and on and on again. And right now, cocaine and methamphetamine are taking the hit. And again, it's
But on
due
top of that, in
to,
the article, she wants to develop drugs to fix the problem with the drugs.
yeah, exactly. And then, but that's a whole different topic, where they're like, okay,
Again,
let's, and I
insanity,
remember,
right?
yeah. And Hannah Picard I don't know if you watched it, but there's a discussion that she just came out with last week. And she talks about the funding again, how basically, it's virtually impossible to get any funding for any research if your basic presupposition is not that addiction is a chronic relapsing brain disease, right? So, any other type of idea that you'd want to research is almost impossible to fund. So, I think anyone with half a brain can see how that would be an issue when we're talking about research.
Right. You think as scientists and researchers, you wouldn't want to just like entirely close off other avenues of consideration for like topics that you were constantly claiming are so important. They are very important, but like it seems counterproductive. No, but
Yeah. Well, it's this idea of coming up with a theory and then finding supporting evidence when the opposite should be true. You should come up with an idea and try to disprove it as best you can. And as long as it's not disprovable, the odds are in favor of it being correct.
right.
But at any point in time, if it's proven false, well, there you go. You were wrong. End of story. Move on to a different idea. But that's really not how these studies are conducted, unfortunately.
I have this conversation often when certainly didn't coin this term, but I use it a whole lot, and I don't know where I got it from, but like what a large number of people are doing, and this is even outside the realm of addiction and science, it's fused into politics and lots of other things, is people have I don't even think most people are aware of it. They have a top-down approach to their positions on things, and that they oftentimes they inherit a belief or they just pick something that they feel is right, and then they spend significant amounts of time basically entrenching that position throughout their lives, as opposed to a bottom-up approach, which is where you sort of take an examination of available evidence or what your experiences are, or what have you, and you build something from that until you reach a conclusion, and then there's your position. And this is like a huge problem, in my opinion, in just the general way that we think in society today, and we're really doing people a disservice by not. People aren't even aware of this. I wasn't aware of this till I was like 25 that I was doing this. So we got to figure out. That's like a whole other conversation. We got to figure out how to stop that problem at some point.
Mhm.
But if you don't have anything else to add, we'll move on to the next question, Daniel.
Yeah, no, just a final thing. That's why, if you're watching this and you think that what we're saying is absolute nonsense, you think we're absolutely wrong, please do your utmost best to prove us wrong in the comments.
We
Maybe
are
we are
very
wrong.
genuine about that.
Yeah, maybe we are wrong about some stuff. So go right ahead and show us how wrong we are, you know?
This
And
is if you're on YouTube. If you're in the Facebook group, that is not a debate ground.
yeah, no,
You can message
exactly.
us otherwise.
Exactly. Bring it to YouTube. And of course, maybe the opposite will happen as well, where you think that we're absolutely wrong, and then we'll show you that, no, actually your position is wrong. So it's a win-win either way.
I really
So
like learning. So
yeah, exactly. So please engage with us. We really appreciate it. Whether it's love or hate, it's engagement, and we can learn from it.
all right.
So let's jump on to the next one.
Yeah, the next one we got here. Um, this one's short and sweet. Resisted well tonight, folks. Came up with a better idea. Daniel?
Yeah. Well, first off, that's not what we're about, right? Resisting implies a struggle, right? It implies that either drugs have power or that there's something within you that's fighting itself, right? So you're having this inner conflict between two aspects of yourselves, which is basically another way of saying that you're ambivalent, you know. And the reason why you're ambivalent is because you've placed a very high value on the substance, right? So the general idea is if you decrease the value, well, all of a sudden, the choice becomes clear. It's not a struggle at all, right? So instead of trying to white knuckle it, um, take the time to go through our program so you can start making a clear appraisal of what's actually going on, right? What do I think I'm getting out of this versus what I'm actually getting out of this, right? And as you go through the mythology of everything, you'll quickly come to the realization that a lot of it is a construct within your own mind, right? And at that point, it's very straightforward to move on, right? Because being in an internal battle with yourself all day long, that really sucks. And if you think that you're fighting against like the drugs or the booze, you're basically giving them power. Um, and that's also, again, something, what it's a good reason for not counting time as well, right? Because the whole time that you're counting your quote unquote abstinence time, you're basically saying that this drug is so powerful, that it's a really big deal to be away from it for X amount of time, you know. Now, that's not the way we look at any other type of stuff. Like, again, when we're talking about relationships, can you sit down and tell me how many days it's been since you broke up with X person that you were crazy in love with, that it didn't work out?
I
Like,
hope
no.
not for your sake.
You'd have to sit down and start doing the math on years. You could probably pull off months, unless there was some very specific event at a very specific point in time. The day would be like kind of hard to pinpoint. But the bottom line is, either way, if it's been 5 years, for example, you're not out there celebrating that I broke up with that girl 5 years ago, right? And you're definitely not resisting going back with her, like if you're like, you know what, I don't love her anymore, this is crazy, this is not working, and you've moved on and she calls you back, you're most likely going to press the block button and be like, nope, I don't want you in my life. So yeah, that's, when I see the term resisting, I know that Mark did answer that stuff as well. But for our listeners, it's still a pretty good one, especially since it would appear for a lot of people, I've noticed, that they come up with this idea that we're basically saying, like, just white knuckle it, be a responsible adult and just move forward. And Ironically,
To
there's a
being a responsible adult,
yeah,
unrelated. You can do both.
ironically, there's a program on Facebook that I keep on seeing appear ads for, and that's literally his message. It's like, quit lying, quit being a fuck up, and just,
Yes.
just be responsible. And I kind of laugh because, like, yeah, for some people, I guess that's the message they want to hear, and that's going to kind of like get them to do that. But for the average person, I don't think that's a very healthy or useful message at all. The problem is that you're madly in love with something that, that's causing a big problem in your life. And the reasons why you're in love with that are most likely just a product of your own imagination rather than an objective truth. So once you start clearing through that, you quickly realize, what, this is not working. I don't want this in my life. I'm not getting what I want. And you'll start moving in the direction of what you actually do want in your life, and be a lot happier. And it won't be a struggle, right? If you quit a job that really sucks for a job that you really love, well, guess what? You're pretty goddamn happy, and you don't sit around moping, thinking about that old job that you were at, right? You just move on with your life. And that's what the general idea here behind the freedom model is. Look at what's actually going on, and you'll quickly realize that it's not giving me what I think it's giving me.
Right. Or something else could give it to you better.
Exactly.
The only thing I'll add, or I've just sort of doubled down on, this is absolutely foundational. I tell people all the time, there's a reason that stuff like AA fails at the rate that it does, and traditional rehab fails at the rate that it does, is that those are programs of deprivation and resistance. You're being taught how to resist something you still really want and is of insanely high value to you, rather than you're always running away from something, normally because they've emphasized the consequences or they're trying to scare you, but you still really want the thing. We are not a program of deprivation. I don't want you to give up things that you want or that make you happy. We are here to help undistort some of your belief systems so that you can make the best informed decision about what is best for you, your life, and your own happiness. And that is it. We want you running towards what makes you happy and fulfilled, not away from something that you really want or trying to resist it. That's just like, I don't think it's sustainable. And if you do sustain it, it leads to a miserable life. So that's just all I have to say about that. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next one.
Yeah, we got two more.
Hey everyone, looking for some hints from your personal experience. Perhaps you can relate. My relationship with drinking has been so much better since applying the freedom model. One thing I'm still struggling with is the fact that I still believe that 2 or 3 pints of beer at the end of the day is still a relaxing / pleasurable / preferable activity for me. On the days that I don't do that, I try to have 2 to 3 alcohol-free days a week. I feel a sense of lacking or missing out. I have read and reread chapters 16 through 20, and I understand that alcohol can't provide pleasure, but I'm struggling to really integrate this fact to the point that I no longer feel that urge at the end of the day. Anyone had experience with getting through this? So there's a good amount there. If you want to jump into this, Daniel.
Yeah. Well, here they're saying, I still believe that 2 or 3 pints of beer at the end of the day is still relaxing, pleasurable, and a preferable activity to me. Well, to that, I would say it is, because you built a very strong learned connection to all of this, So it's really that simple. But when you're looking at it, I think, when you're talking about, I feel a sense of lack, what's lacking? And I feel like I'm missing out. Well, what do you feel like you're missing out on, right? Because once you start pinpointing the stuff, that's when you can sit down and question, am I really getting this stuff from the actual drinking, or am I getting them from the ritual of drinking, right? So again, coming back to what we were talking before, this is a discussion that I had with my girlfriend quite some time ago, actually, where she asked me, well, do you think I believe stuff about alcohol that's not true? And I said, of course, most people do. And she kind of gave me this weird look and said, well, like what? And I'm like, well, when you had a really stressful day at work and you come home and you pour yourself a drink to relax. And she's like, yeah. I'm like, well, did you know that alcohol doesn't have the ability to make you relax? And she struggled with that. We had a discussion, but she really clearly came to the conclusion that it was the ritual of sitting down and having the drink that was relaxing her, right? And her strong belief that going through that ritual was going to relax her. So, to this point, she no longer focuses as much on that, but she will still have a drink once in a while. But she has come to the understanding that it's the ritual rather than the consumption of alcohol itself. But I think a few questions also that you can ask yourself is, first off, is it causing you a real problem in your life, right? Because more often than not, the issue is that there's a certain amount of distress because you might think that you really need to be sober, or I shouldn't like this, or I shouldn't believe this, right? So you're basically creating like your own rules in your mind. And because you're not following through on those rules, that's what's causing the distress, right? So there's no actual empirical issue outside of you not being satisfied with the result because of certain beliefs, right? So that's something, again, that's the kind of stuff that we would sit down and explore through private instruction, or coaching, that's what we call it now. And that's simply because oftentimes, we've been brainwashed into this idea that abstinence is the only way, and that's the only factor to calculate success. And so, of course, there's a chapter in the book on success, and my next lesson in the private membership group is going to be on success and how do we look at success? How do you define success? But yeah, I think that might be more the issue right there, right? It's like, is it really causing a problem? And if you feel like it's causing a problem, why is that, right? But again, what do you feel like you're lacking? What do you feel that you're missing out on those days that you do not engage in that behavior, right? Because looking at that can start to bring you towards the general idea of change. So yeah, that's my take on that.
I would absolutely agree with that take. This is oftentimes why, like the one-on-one coaching can be so important, is because a person's individual circumstances, with their own goals, expectations, or beliefs, can be such an enormous part of the equation that we would really need to sit down and talk with you about it to give you to be as helpful as we think we or to provide of maximum assistance to you, or maybe to present information with like a slight twist on it, so maybe it makes it make more sense to you, or something like that. It's perfectly okay for you to have beer or alcohol or whatever drug it is, and enjoy it. We've moralized the crap out of substance use of any kind, especially if it's not the very select few couple of socially acceptable substances. So, which is why, like Daniel said, I would ask the person what their goal is here, what's sort of motivating the desire for change, or what they think is wrong with the current state of their consumption, things like that, because that kind of informs us about sort of how we should move forward. But there's nothing wrong with enjoying alcohol or really any other kind of drug. Drug use is not it's not a moral decision until it starts impacting other people or something like that. It is a morally neutral decision that you're deciding for yourself based on what it is that you enjoy and don't enjoy. The problems that we have, a lot of the problems that we have in society around drugs are because we've injected drugs with all these magical powers that they don't actually have, or we've swept them away to exist only into black markets, which creates stuff like massive fentanyl contamination in the black market drug supply. and like all these other things. So like again, there's a lot of things we can get into here, which is why, for in a lot of instances, the one-on-one coaching can be really beneficial because we really get to know you and your specific situation, and we can present the information in a way that is most suitable to you and whatever your goals might be. You don't even have to know what your goals are yet. That's okay. Like part of this process could be figuring out where you are happiest. The important thing is that you're rid of the hindrance of all these incredibly toxic and self-limiting beliefs imposed on us just because they're publicly accepted or because our entire treatment system is built on a foundation of incredibly self-limiting toxic beliefs. So, other than that, what Daniel said. I think we got one left, right?
Yeah, we got the short one left, which is more a commentary than a question. I thought it was really interesting.
Okay, cool. Let's see what we got. Pondering yesterday while doing yard work. You have to do the hard work. It turns out the harder work is deprogramming and deconstructing the garbage I came to believe and accept. How appropriate. We just got done saying this. The yard work helps to calm the screaming in my head. I can understand why you sat in the garage. I assume she's responding to something Michelle said because she says, Michelle Dunbar, I can understand why you sat in the garage for months trying to see past all the programming. I have a number of things to say about this. You go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, no, the last part is, if I'm not mistaken, is because Michelle was talking about how like the first few months where she stopped drinking, that she really, really struggled and was spending a lot of time in her garage, really depressed.
Okay, that makes sense.
You know, I forget the exact context, but maybe she'll write it up in the commentary. But yeah, I totally agree. Like really analyzing things can be super hard. Our motivations are not necessarily obvious. And so I think it's ironic when, if you go to an AA meeting, for example, when they talk about doing the work is doing the step work, right? So it's this, so it's this general idea that you've opened up to another human being and you've told them all your deepest, darkest secrets, which, is probably extremely risky, especially if you're doing it in a place that has such a huge turnaround rate. So of course, there's a good chance that your secrets are going to be aired out in public. But yeah, the basic idea is that you have to tell someone all your secrets, and then you have to ask God for forgiveness, and then you have to go ask people for forgiveness, and you have to put in some sort of effort, to cause some type of reparations, right? But that's not really going to help you when it comes to your preference, unfortunately. So, of course, there's tons of people that will go through that process and they will do the continual inventory that's asked for in step 10. They will do the praying and meditation that's asked for in step 11. They will do the service work and take other people through the steps, as in step 12. But if they really, really love doing dope, you know what? The odds are pretty good that they're going to go straight back to doing the dope, right? So that's somewhat of a problem. Now, obviously, doing that, as hard as that whole process is, it can be a lot easier than sitting down and really taking an honest look at your motivations and really taking the time to assess every single one of your motivations and seeing, is this objectively true? Is what I believe, is it serving me in my life, right? Is it helping me to engage in behavior that I find helpful and useful in my life, or is it doing the opposite? That can be quite a challenge, and that's why, again, we have coaching. That's why we have an online program, because it can be as straightforward as sitting down, reading the book, and going through the process on your own. But for a lot of people, it's just overwhelming, and that's why, again, we have coaching to sit down and go through this stuff. There's a reason why we do it, because it can be hard. And again, for some people, it's the complete opposite. You got lots of people who they'll just turn around on a dime for whatever reason. One day they'll just wake up and they'll go, you know what? I don't want this anymore in my life. And that's it. They're done, you know? And of course,
Most
for
people
that
do
type
that.
of person, they're not going to be asking for any help. Or if they are
Right.
going through some sort of program, whether it's rehab or therapy or whatever, it's most likely because there's other people around them that are pressuring them to do that, you know. And of course, once they get to being of service to others, since they don't even really know how they pulled it off, the odds of them being able to help someone else to pull it off are slim to none, because they have no goddamn idea how it happened. They just woke up one morning and they were sick and tired of being sick and tired, and that was that. Um, so anyways, that's my take on that. I think that the person who wrote this said it perfectly, because it's exactly that. It can be a very hard process, and it is a certain amount of work for a lot of people. Um, but again, it's quite the contrast with that whole idea that doing the work is some type of spiritual endeavor, where you have to just keep on going for the rest of your life. So anyways, that's my take on that for today, guys.
Yeah, the work that they're talking about is really just a debilitating distraction. It's not productive. It's actually quite counterproductive. Like I said earlier, it's stealing from you the things that you actually need to do the thing that you want to do. If you're interested in making change to your substance use, and you're not just being like, compelled through the door into a rehab by a judge or the police department or your family or, whoever it may be. I know that something that was really hard for me was that everybody grows up feeling like they're weird or like they don't fit in. It's like part of being a teenager or something like that. And I was into a lot of stuff that other people weren't into growing up. Like the music that I like was very. Most people would hate it and it would be unlistenable noise to them, but I really connected with it. Just for an example, so like that in combination with some other problems I had growing up, before I had ever been forced into AA, I'd always had like this weird idea in my head that there was like something different about me, or that like there was some reason I seemed less happy than other people I knew. And then here comes AA like a freight train to confirm that at like 1000% that like not only was I correct in that, but like it's permanent, and the only thing that I can do is work these steps and pray for a daily relief. That is like impossibly hard. It's actually impossible because you can't ever fix the problem. Like it's just a debilitating distraction. It's not a real solution there. You're not actually fixing. It's not even really related to substance use at all. It's just again a debilitating distraction. Understanding yourself and working on yourself and repairing toxic beliefs that you have about yourself and about the world, that can be hard. It's one learning to like love myself and to like have self-esteem and to like fix like toxic belief systems that I had like entrenched over years and years and years. That was very it took a lot of time and effort, but that's true meaningful work, and the kind of reward that you get when you learn to love yourself, or you end up with the happiness or fulfillment that you were seeking, or you make the changes to your substance use that you actually want to make, or things like that, what you get at the end, like there's no monetary price that you could ever put to that. It's like after I got the freedom model, and which is sort of has established the foundation for me to learn how to be okay with myself and to like build self-esteem. Once I figured out that I wasn't broken forever as I had been taught, like I became the happiest that I'd ever been in my entire life. And that made all those years in AA worth it, and all that time spent feeling weird and broken and hopeless and everything else. I'm just like so grateful that I found the freedom model and was able to get through those experiences so that I could get to the other end and just to get to be who I am now. And it wouldn't have happened without. So if that's, if you want to call that the work, that's what the real work is. And that can be challenging. Some people make changes to their substance use fast. Some people do it slow. Oftentimes, there's a lot of other belief systems you have embedded in there about yourself, about what it's doing for you, about what you might be running from or trying to deal with. And that's why I'll never like shout someone down for like trying to go to therapy or something like that. I certainly did, because what we're dealing with here is substance use and the mythology surrounding that, and the magic powers we've imbued substance with, and all of that nonsense. Once you've removed that and you've learned that you're not a broken person anymore and you're not an addict entrenched with these character defects that make you different from everyone else, like it's almost like this burden has been lifted from you. You can make actual changes to your substance use, and if there are other issues now that you need to work on, that you need to really sink your teeth into, you have now the time, energy, effort to do them, and you have the belief in yourself that you could actually make changes to those things. And that's nothing short of life changing. Just knowing that you're not broken and that you have agency and you can fix your problems, like, is like the power underneath that foundation is indescribable and bordering basically limitless. So it's why I love to teach this to people so much. So, or one of the many reasons anyway. I know that was kind of a bit there, but was there anything else that you'd like to add, Daniel?
No, I think you put it very succinctly. Um, you know, yeah, the way to initiate change, the first thing is to come to that realization that you have the capacity to change, right? Which is the complete opposite of what's being taught, right? That you have to surrender to win, that you are powerless, and that you have to admit that you are an alcoholic or an addict. And, those ideas presuppose that you can't do it, that
That you're broken.
you simply have to push and push and push, and with some luck the miracle will happen, you know which is the ultimate paradox, because of course if you sit down and look at the people that change even within the rooms, you'll notice that it has nothing to do with how much service they got involved in. It has nothing to do with how many meetings they went to. It has nothing to do with how much step work they did. It all has to do with them and their relationship with the substance, and having made a decision at some point in their life that they're just better off without it. That's what it comes down to. At the moment that they've come to that decision, that's when they switch. And unfortunately, a lot of people, because they've fallen into that entire belief system, and I was one of those people, they keep on going to meetings. They keep on going to meetings. I decided from day one, I'd already decided that I was done. I wanted nothing to do with that stuff anymore. And, for the next almost 15 years, I did not have a drop of alcohol. I did not touch a single drug. Christ, for the first 10 years, I didn't even take a Tylenol. If I had a headache, I just dealt with my headache, you know? Um,
Insanity.
yeah. And, I did a lot of meetings, but that's not what drove that behavior. What drove that behavior is the decision that I'd made at that time, because I truly believed that I would be happier without it than with it. And that just kept on going. So, yeah, we've gone through quite some time. It's been an hour and 13 minutes.
Yeah, we're
So,
13 minutes over this time.
yeah, if you
We
just
got
want to
better,
close
and then
this
we went
out.
over.
We had a lot. And, frankly, I was looking at all the questions that were on the forum today, and we could have answered another half dozen easily. We could have made this show like 2-3 hours easy. So, yeah. Well, let's just bow out for now, and we'll be back in 3 weeks this time.
Yeah, 3 weeks. Let's see. The date will be what?
I think it's the 6th.
It's
I'd have
seventh.
to check.
It's the 7th.
The
So
7th? Okay.
December 7th will be the next time we will be doing a live Q&A. If you have any question for us, it gives you plenty of time to think about it, to formulate them, to send them to us. You can email them to us at these email addresses. You can send them to them send them to us on Facebook. If you're in the Facebook group, you can post them there. We typically harvest them in mass from the Facebook group whenever we get ready to do these things, so they'll get picked up that way. If you have something that you're really, really, really dying to know that didn't get answered in some capacity during one of these Q&As or from this most recent one, you're welcome to message us, email us after the fact, and we'll do our best to help you in whichever way that we can. You can also call the phone number, 1-888-424-2626. We're reachable. You can find us. and we're gonna do our best to help you. So a lot of problems or a lot of situations are highly individualist, which is going to require a lot of time and energy, which is why oftentimes we recommend coaching. We have an entire book which you can get on Amazon. There's an audiobook as well. We have to go along with, or you can get independently of an Amazon purchase, an entire online curriculum of video series. I think it's like what? It's like over 60 hours of video content, or
65 videos.
Yeah. So it's a
Plus the
lot,
family stuff. That's 12
right?
videos.
And the
There's a
workbook.
lot.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff. We're trying to present you with the material and the best way we can give it to you, and in the most ways that we can give it to you, so that because we're just giving you the truth. And because of all the misinformation out there, sometimes it takes more than just simple delivery of some text on a page to really make that sink in. You could know something logically and it not register at the emotional level that it needs to register at for it to have the impact that it needs to. And again, because of the highly individual nature of everyone being different, sometimes the best way to present that information is different, which is again why we have the coaching. And it's our job to figure that out. And him and I both love doing it. So, Daniel, am I missing anything here?
No, although I will point out that we will put priority on any questions that are put in the YouTube box, right? So in the YouTube discussion.
Oh, go sub to our YouTube channel.
Yeah. And any questions that are put there in the discussion group will be prioritized in our next Q&A.
Yeah, we just released a 5-part video series responding to a Diane Sawyer interview with Matthew Perry. You might know him better as Chandler from Friends. He just released a memoir where he talks about addiction a whole lot, and we kind of respond to a bunch of the bogus he says in the interview. 5 videos. We got 5 videos. That's how much he can possibly put into one interview. We have tried to address as much of it as we humanly could. We've already recorded more content like that. I've been in the editing process of it. Moving forward, we're going to have more content like that for you on the YouTube channel. So please do subscribe to that. It's a lot of it's going to be educational, highly entertaining. Whatever it is that you're looking for, we got it for you. Please do also engage on that platform as well. It helps us grow the YouTube channel, which in a lot of ways is where people find us. The podcast is posted there. We're also oftentimes responding to high-profile names, events, happenings. So the more engagement we get there, the higher the likelihood we get picked up in the algorithm and recommended to more people so that we can change this problem faster, because way too many people are dying because we have a system that just doesn't help people at all. It doesn't do anything but manufacture addicts and basically kill people. And I don't have any qualms in saying that at this point. You disagree with me, like we said, feel free to challenge us on it. Other than that, website, thefreedommodel.org. Anything else, Daniel, before I close this out?
No, that's that. So we'll see all you guys in 3 weeks.
All right, we'll see you guys in 3 weeks, or hopefully on the YouTube page. I'll respond to your comments. He will too. So,
oh yeah, we'll be there the whole time for the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, you guys have an amazing rest of your weeks.